Obtains condition enlarged. That could be taken out of context. With two very ambitious RPGs now starting development, what better way to see our visions realized than by growing the team and opening a 7th studio in the heart of Poland's lively gaming scene? Welcome, Larian Studios, Warsaw. But are they welcomed? Don't worry though, as PC gamers got our back and they decided to ask the genius question of, do you feel threatened by Larian, to CDPR, another Polish developer, and then turn it into headlines and an article. CD Projekt Red doesn't feel threatened by Larian's move into Warsaw, the more the merrier, and Larian's director of publishing responds, bro, we literally friends. PC Gamer trying to start a turf war here? So yeah, amidst the layoffs and all the uncertainty in the gaming industry, little Larian, who's not so little anymore, is expanding. And for those of you that are curious, they now have a studio in Barcelona, Dublin, Ghent is their main studio, Guildford, Kuala Lumpur, which is Malaysia, Quebec, and Warsaw, Poland. They did used to have a studio in St. Petersburg, Russia, but due to complications with the Russian-Ukrainian war, that studio shut down. So why is this studio opening significant? Well, Larian Studios is one of the few larger, what most would now consider AAA studios out there, at least in terms of access to resources and team size, independent studios out there, and they're growing amidst the chaos. Having an independent studio expanding right now is a bit of a beacon of hope, and it's really cool to see Larian, leading the forecharge and showing the gaming industry that there are other ways to be successful outside of just completely selling out your company the instant that you get some offer or something like that. Now, Tencent does own 30% of Larian, but we'll talk about this later in the video as to why I think it's still fair to call Larian an independent studio. Taking a quick look at the job openings for this Warsaw studio, maybe we can get a little idea as to something about one of the upcoming games, maybe. We have RPG designer, graphics programmer, engine programmer, gameplay programmer, producer, QA lead, gameplay scripter, tools programmer, and writer. And speaking of really cool jobs, you got to start somewhere, and this brings us into today's really cool video sponsor, Boot.dev, which allows you to learn programming online with self-paced courses that are designed to feel like a captivating RPG. In Boot.dev, as you learn back-end web development from start to finish in the Python and Go programming languages, you'll also be earning XP, there's quests, achievements, levels, and even global leaderboards. The folks at Boot.dev believe that the smartest way to learn code is by never being bored in the process, and yeah, they understand us gamers. As you can see, there's a ton of valuable courses to delve into here, each of which offers a free demo that you can just mess with and try it out. It's super cool. And of course, all of this leads to you learning how to find a programming job. And the median salary for back-end developers in the US last year was in the 6 figures. Do note though that this is not a get-rich-quick scheme, as Boot.dev believes in going deep and really taking time to learn the fundamentals so you're truly prepared for that job search. The only way to really learn though is to get your hands on that keyboard and actually ship projects, which is what this program is designed to do. So click the link in the description box and use my code WolfheartFPS to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% off your first month or first year depending on the subscription that you choose. Go check it out. I love these guys. Back to the video. The RPG designer position is described as you'll be working with a team that shapes the world, stories, and characters that make for memorable adventures. Working closely with the other departments, the RPG designer helps transform narrative into fun gameplay that reacts to the player's actions in an impactful way. This is always great to see as we get further confirmation that Larian Studios is really leaning into world reactivity, player agency, choice, consequence, something that I would say is lacking in most modern day RPGs, at least in any meaningful way. And I am going to rant about this for a moment. There are chapter markers below. So what makes Larian special is that they are willing to do what most studios are not willing to do. They're willing to spend a lot of time and resources creating content that only a small portion of the player base will end up seeing and experiencing. And it's actually understandable as to why many other studios won't do this, as who would want to spend time and resources making content that less than 1 to 5% of the player base may actually experience? It feels like a waste, right? Well, no, it's actually not. And what I think many studios don't take into account here is that all these little bits of unique content and special outcomes that only small groups of players get to experience, all of this adds up, and the sum of it into one package holds immense weight, and weight that works greatly in a studio's favor if they're competent, of course. Coming from the player's perspective, simply just knowing that this type of reactivity and content exists in a game, even if you don't know what all the content is specifically, nor will you likely ever experience all of it, this changes the mindset of a player, making them feel that true player agency. And in an RPG, that's huge. For example, very few players will play as a Githyanki, yet there's still a ton of dialogue and special outcomes in the game for players that do choose to play as a Githyanki. Very few players will know that you can poison the booze tub in the Goblin Fortress, yet the option still exists, and Larian still put the time and resources into making it exist. Larian did this knowing that very few players will experience that type of content, but they also did it understanding that it greatly adds to the overall package of the game and the mindset of a player that's playing their game. Hope that made sense. Touching back on the Warsaw tweet, we now know that both of the games that Larian is working on are actually RPGs. Of course, we knew that one of them was, but there was always a chance of one of them being something a little bit different. And also what surprised me, and it shouldn't have surprised me though, was that Larian is labeling both of these games as very ambitious. Ever since Larian announced 2 games in the past, I've just been assuming that one of the 2 games here was going to be like a really small little weird side project, nothing to get too hyped about. But with both of these projects being said to be very ambitious, I now find myself extremely excited for both of them. This of course doesn't mean that both games will be this massive BG3 like game in scope. One of them could still be quite small, but it does mean that we should expect Larian to push the boundaries with both of these. So yeah, now we can all be doubly excited together. In a recent interview that Hubert Sosnowski conducted with Sven and Adam Smith, who's Larian's writing director, I'll leave a link to this interview below. It's on GamePressure.com. It's a really good interview. Hubert said to Sven, Divine Divinity was a way different beast than DOS 2 or BG3. Larian is experimenting from game to game. Is this kind of turn-based RPG the ultimate formula for Larian, or is there something else in your mind that you want to do? And Sven responded, so the answer is yes. I love turn-based strategy, but I'm not shy of action. You'll have to wait and see. I do consider the thing that you recognize the experimentation as a compliment because we do try stuff out. You don't want to keep on making the same thing. I think it's fair to assume that at least one of these upcoming RPGs is going to be turn-based. Now, whether it will be more like the Divinity series turn-based or Baldur's Gate 3, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe Larian will kind of figure out a hybrid. I think that would be pretty cool. But Sven did say that he's not shy on action. So this makes me wonder, just maybe one of these 2 games may actually be more of an action RPG or may have some action real-time elements to it. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm also not against it. I think as long as Larian does continue their staple turn-based formula with one of the games, they should try some cool stuff out. It'd be cool to have Larian enter into that type of combat system because there's so many bad quality companies out there that do it horribly. I just want to see Larian's take on an action system. They have done it in the past with some of their games, but that was a long time ago in the past. Something to think about. We also learned in the interview that the code name for one of these upcoming games is Excalibur, which is also the name of one of Sven's new puppies. So if you hear me reference Excalibur in the future, that's what I'm referring to. Not Sven's puppy. Maybe I should do a video on Sven's puppies. I'm referring to one of these upcoming RPGs. For those of you who missed the news in the past, Larian did say before that they're not making BG4 or making a D&D game. And for at least one of these projects, we should be expecting an Act 1 early access like phase, something similar to what they did with BG3 and DOS 2. And also one of these upcoming RPGs will likely be a completely new IP. All right, now let's get into Sven's thoughts on the future of the gaming industry and also why Larian was able to achieve such great success. In the interview, Sven told us that Larian's approach to creating games is that content is king and that content should dictate the rules. And the opposite of this mindset would be profits need to be doubled, so let's add microtransactions. If you treat content like it's the most important thing and that it's king, then yeah, predatory microtransactions, confusing currencies, weird game mechanics that are meant to drive you to some store, etc. None of that fits that model because it diminishes the content and therefore it doesn't work for Larian's approach. When profit is king, all of that can fit the model as the content itself isn't necessarily the most important thing because unfortunately in the gaming industry there are ways to make a ton of profit with lackluster content. Luckily for us, that's not Larian's way though, and because we see so many studios out there that do have profit as king these days, especially the larger ones, this really makes Larian stand out. And in any competitive industry, standing out is very important. So the hopes here are that this will inspire other studios to aim for Larian's strategy so that they can also stand out. When a big game comes out these days that doesn't have ridiculous micros and weird price ranges that try to filter you into subscription models, oh god, this is classic. As long as the games are good, this can lead to a rally behind the studio and the product like what we saw with Baldur's Gate 3 and Larian Studios. Sven actually said that he sees this power shift happening. There are a couple of developers in the RPG space that we follow closely that you're going to see grow, and they're all starting to publish themselves also. That's important because they're making the relationship with their players themselves, so they're not beholden to corporate overlords. The milking isn't working as well anymore, and this is what's causing upset in our industry right now. This is what we love to hear. Let's hope that Sven is right. Hubert also asked Sven, does straightforward contact with players help in maintaining that identity? To which Sven replies, yes. Who are you making games for? For your players. A long time ago, Interplay had this phrase, by gamers, for gamers. That's a really good attitude for game development for a games industry to start there. If you have somebody that's making decisions and they don't play games at all, I don't think they should be making decisions on what video games are being made. Love to hear this out of Larian Studios, and yes, that of course does make complete sense. And if I recall correctly, back in the day, this is kind of how the gaming industry formed. It was by gamers, for gamers, and this is why so many classic RPGs are timeless and will never be forgotten. Over time, however, as more and more people realized the money potential in gaming, as it started to become more and more popular, the gaming industry started to shift to be more like CEOs for shareholders versus by gamers, for gamers. And before I end the video here, I do want to touch back on Larian being an independent company. So Tencent owns 30% of Larian, I believe, and Sven and his wife own the rest. But Tencent's share appears to be what's called a preference share. I don't think we have official confirmation on this, but it does make sense, and preference shareholders do not have voting rights. So if you define the word independent as free from the influence of other parties, I think it's fair to call Larian an independent studio, especially considering that they're also their own publisher. And yeah, that's it for this video. As always, I will keep you in the loop for all Baldur's Gate 3 news and Larian Studios news. Big things coming in the future out of Larian. I can't wait to cover it all, and I can't wait till we get like an announcement trailer. That's going to be such a hype day when that actually comes. It's probably a little ways away, but it is something to be excited about. Thank you to boot.dev for sponsoring this video, and I'll catch you all on the next one.